Live from the International Debate, Research, Rhetoric, and Argumentation Research and Podcast Facility, lovely, livable, Rocky Point, New York. This is In the Bin. In the Bin is your number one source for news and views and all things rhetoric, debate, argumentation, heard worldwide, made with New York pride. I'm Dr. Ciano. Hello and welcome to the program. You can reach us anywhere, Spotify, iHeartRadio. We're on YouTube, podcast, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, anywhere. Find podcasts to pervade. You can get us there. You can email us at inthebinpodcast@gmail.com. Go to inthebinpodcast.com, and you never have to do it, but if you want to financially support what we're doing here, please go to buymeacoffee.com/inthebinpodcast. Every amount is acceptable. How is everybody? Doing well, I hope. It's Wednesday once again. And just a few minutes before I started recording, I started to have a little allergy problems, which is, no good at all. I don't know why. I went and had my car washed today. Maybe that has something to do with it. But it also was our first really hot day here in Long Island. But here in the HVAC, climate-controlled podcast research facility, we don't have any of that nonsense. So now that I'm inside, I should be better. Hopefully I'll clear up, but there won't be any sneezing. But I can edit that out for you guys because you're the best.
Superb.
I'll edit it all out for you. So a couple of things before we get into this episode, which is about how British parliamentary debate has failed us all and has failed, pretty much failed everybody, I think, who's interested in debate and interested in teaching debate. Hate to say it, but a lot of the things that some of the policy debate critics back in 2007 were right about how it wasn't going to, I think the thing they were most right about was it wasn't going to provide anything markedly different than what CETA was providing in CETA East. And it would just drain those numbers, and CETA would be worse off for it. I don't think all of that has come true. I think that what has come true is that CETA is not doing well, BP is not doing well, NPDA is not doing well. Oh my God, they're really not doing well. NFALD, IPDA, everybody's falling apart, and nobody can really address the elephant in the room, which is that all of these things are going to die because they're cut off from their proper environment. So we're going to get to that in a bit when I talk about how BP failed to live up to the standards to what most of us were sold or told that it was going to turn into. And I think a lot of it is that, another thing I'll talk about is how BP was kind of structured to be entertainment for privileged elites is its origin. So it's not really designed to bring people up to speed who might not be all on the same page, which is like the American education system, public schooling and all that. Was kind of, there are certain activities and certain things that are designed to give people that public democratic competency and voice. And I think that the way debate in BP, in British parliamentary format or world's format, is sort of a hobby or game by people who are already have a lot of privilege and advantage and a lot of really, really great education. So it's not a great format for most universities in the U.S., I would say. There's a few that, Harvard, Yale, these kind of places. I think it's good for them because these are people who've already had a huge amount of educational experience, and they want to see what they got. They want to see what they got and use it. And I think that that's not necessarily something that's good for an education system that purports to reach everyone. So we'll get into all of that. But first, I want to talk about some of the other things going on. A wise and intrepid listener pointed this out to me, and I can't wait to share this with you. I sure hope I queued it up correctly because this is so good. This is from Kenneth Burke's Philosophy of Literary Form. And this is the section in about page 300 where he's talking about sociological criticism. And sociological criticism for Kenneth Burke, famous rhetorical theorist, among other things, not just a rhetorical theorist. He's kind of like, like I always tell the story about how when the St. John's Library was like, we got to get rid of our books. We have too many books, which is actually something I did today. I probably should have run the laugh track. It's actually something I did today is I have a lot of books that I'm not using, someone else could use. So I take them over to Longwood Library here in Long Island, pretty close by, maybe about 10 minutes from here. I took like 3 boxes of books in there, and they're all going to be just perplexed. They're going to be like, they're used to getting like romance novels and fiction and all that kind of stuff, and they're going to get a bunch of like, I gave them like a lot of my Lukács books.
Oh.
A lot of Marxist stuff.
Oh.
Things I wasn't really looking at anymore. Collections of essays by weird, eccentric people, and some plays. I don't know. They're very happy to have them, and I'm happy to give them. But these are the kind of books that I can't sell because nobody wants them but me. They've already been bought by the person who would want them. So there's no one to sell them to. So I gave them away to the library. So if you are interested in a bunch of weird Marxist books, some Lacan books, and some other weird theory books, head over to the Longwood Public Library in, I think it's in Coram, New York, out here in Long Island. And go get yourself a bargain. Some Marcuse is in there. Stuff that I looked at, and I was like, oh, I'll never look at that again. But the St. John's Library was doing that too, because the administration was like, we got to clear the second floor of the library off to have faculty offices. And it was going to be a humanities center, but it turned out to be like the most useless college in our entire university, the professional studies college. They're I don't know where to begin. They're terrible. But ironically, their offices are in the library, which is like the least likely people to pick up a book or have their faculty offices in there. It's the most ridiculous thing. But anyway, they were cleaning it out. And so all the faculty were like, they're going to clean out the books. You got to go and make sure you get the right books. So I went to the library on campus, and I was like, I got to make sure the Kenneth Burke books are here. And I went looking around, and one of the things that really struck me was how Kenneth Burke's works are in all different areas. Like he's in anthropology, history, philosophy, sociology. He's even in education. According to the Library of Congress cataloging system, he's in all these different places. He's not just in one place. Plus, there's not just like a communication or rhetoric section. Rhetoric is architectonic, as Richard McKeon teaches us. So rhetoric is present in all these different fields and all these different places. So he's everywhere. So he's talking about doing this kind of criticism. A viewer, a listener, we're very grateful for this kind of stuff. So send us an email. It'll get used on the air. We found this really kind of hilarious quote. So Burke is talking about sociological criticism here, where he's talking about how you want to codify different works together based on what they concern themselves with, and then you can pull them apart and look at differences instead of saying, well, this was an excellent work in its period, and this is an excellent work in its period. You bring them all together and put them all together, and then you say, oh, look, here's how they are all together and stuck together, but then they will be different based on the situations and strategies of the particular, and you can break those things up. And then he talks about Spengler here, which is a little weird to hear him referencing Spengler. Oswald Spengler wrote this very famous 2-volume book called The Decline of the West, where he talked about a kind of a racialized history. It was very influential to the Beat generation, Spengler's work. They looked at that, and there were like certain kinds of native peoples or so-called primitive peoples who had all the secrets for the future. And that was kind of the admiration of American blacks that the Beats had, came from Spengler's weird racialized idea of who's got the wisdom, and it comes through racial. Kind of like a weird kind of version of Assassin's Creed where everyone's got the ancient memories in their DNA. I don't know. Anyway, maybe I can do a Spengler episode if you guys are interested. Anyway, we will codify all of this lore and put together things that have the same strategy together in a dirty joke and a sermon, and then we would say, look at the situation here and how that situation is being addressed. And then he's going on and on and on about the different kinds of things. There aren't leaps in his sociological criticism. It's about combining things together. We can look at the text. You can go read it. So we look at different ways of classifying novels. It gets people more interested, he thinks. And then down here, he says this. These categories rely on the bias across the categories of modern specialization. That is, people will group things together based on where they are in life and where they are in history and where they are in their point of view. The new alignment will outrage, in particular, those persons who take the division of faculties in our universities to be exact replica of the way in which God himself divided up the universe. So if you think that your ideas are coming down from on high, you're probably going to get very upset. We've had the philosophy of the being. We've had the philosophy of the becoming. And in contemporary specialization, we have been getting the philosophy of the bin. Look at that. So right there, the philosophy of the bin, we're mentioned in Kenneth Burke right there. Thank you. It's a big moment for me. It's a big moment for all of our fans. What is the philosophy of the bin? Well, it's this garbage philosophy of contemporary specialization. So that is where we are in terms of being mentioned in Kenneth Burke. I think it's a great chapter. I was rereading it earlier today, thinking about this email that we got, this message that we got saying, hey, philosophy of the bin. Look, you guys made it. So anyway, thank you to our listener. Always great. Thanks for sending it in. We love it. So that was the first thing I want to talk about. The second thing I want to talk about is I was thinking about doing a definition of rhetoric episode of In the Bin, and I wonder what you think of doing that. Kenneth Burke wrote his very famous Definition of Man essay, which I think everybody has to read at some point, whether you're an undergraduate in rhetoric class or graduate student in a modern period rhetoric class. It's not really contemporary anymore. Modern rhetoric or 20th century rhetorics, you would have to read that, I think. And learn it, deal with it, whatever. But Definition of Man is almost kind of a definition of rhetoric. So I was thinking about, in the spirit of that, doing kind of my own definition of rhetoric. And the one thing that I had really come up with as a start to it was this idea of things that have a deep meaning that have no right to have that deep meaning. And that was where I was starting thinking about rhetoric. Things that have a very deep meaning, but they don't have a right to have it. Like, we're a little bit suspicious of why they mean so much to us. And that might be a way of thinking about the rhetorical in terms of meaning, values, the things that we find precious, the things that we really like, all of that stuff. So I was thinking about doing that. Let me know your thoughts about that. That's kind of where I start when I'm thinking about that. And it's an open invitation for debate there. And a nice way to frame debate is, let's investigate whether or not these things that we think have such a deep meaning and such an important meaning, do they have a right to have that deep meaning? Let's probe that. Let's see where that is. So that opens up an entire rhetoric of motion writing or topic writing. For those of you who might not be familiar, of course, all of you are familiar. Writing a motion is one of the most important things about a debate. It's writing the topic. Has to be done very carefully, or else you end up with a lot of bad debates. So writing that topic, this kind of opens up a philosophy for that. Let's have topics that are things that we are very, very certain are incredibly valuable, but there's still a little bit of hesitation or doubt that maybe they don't deserve to be that important or valuable. They don't deserve to be that loved or that vital to us. Anything like that. But that phrase that I thought of, I don't know, something that came to me over the weekend. So speaking of which, had a great debater reunion over the weekend. We have some video I promised I would share from that great wedding of a former St. John's debater, Dan Tran, who we all know and love. I guess maybe you know. You might know Dan. Dan didn't go to a lot of different debate competitions, but when he did, he was always very supportive, cheerful team member, excellent guy, really great guy. Always had something smart to say. Always had good comments. He was really, really great guy. And he invited me to the wedding. I was very surprised he invited me to his wedding in Boston. So my partner and I, we went up there and had a great time. We had a little bit of a debate reunion, but I wanted to show you some of this video. We have got, we've got it here somewhere. Aha. We got a bunch of video. I won't show you everything, but I did want to show you some of the, like, look at the size of this place. This is great, huh? This is the wedding reception. So great. So amazing.
Okay, folks, we're here at the wedding reception.
Yep, there I am. Looking very nice. They had a bunch of karaoke and stuff.
There's
there.
Dan over there.
Looking for Dan.
Can I zoom in? Is it possible?
So this is like quite a collection of ex-St. John's debate people.
He made it.
Yeah, so there's a couple of guys. So here, we're in the right, this is Nipoon, Kat, George, who George founded In the Bin with me. Many years ago. We did the first episodes together. So there's George, also known as Fitz, for you, long time In the Bin. This is David and Rachel, who I just met there, who Rachel is Tim's fiance. I'll back it up here. And you can see Tim kind of there he is. And Tim here, who has been on In the Bin many times. I don't think David's ever been on. Rachel definitely not, because I just met her. George. Kat has never been on there, but Kat's going to promote her podcast, so I want to get to that. But anyway, this was a great moment that really made me sort of think how interesting. First of all, how long ago was this when I met all these people and they were students? David was not a St. John's student, but how strange how quickly that time went by. I know that's like a trope, but it went by pretty fast. And now here we are in this position in life, and I'm just very grateful to know these people. But it got me thinking about some of the larger social implications of debate and some of the larger social consequences of debate, about who it puts in touch and in contact and what relationships develop over time. So, oh yeah, this is the pouring of the alcohol. We don't need to see this. And some of the food. And then we'll have cats. Yeah, this was a great feast. Look at this. Thank you, Dan. Oh yeah, there's the chicken. Delicious.
Now that it's a little quieter, you can pitch your...
Oh yeah, Hot Cup of Code podcast for all things code and culture.
There you go. So Kat's podcast. Hot Cup of Code? Is that what it was? Hot Cup of Code? Chicken.
You are...
I think this is the one where she proves Hot Cup of Code.
Now that it's a little quieter, you can pitch your...
Oh yeah, Hot Cup of Code podcast for all things code and culture.
For all things code and culture. Hot Cup of Code podcast. You can see George is into it. Look at that. George is really into it from that still frame there. Sorry, George, didn't mean to do you dirty with that freeze frame there. He's just a little bit overwhelmed that his favorite podcast was mentioned. Well, besides In the Bin, his second favorite podcast was mentioned a little bit. Well, anyway, that was a great reunion. There's this book I've been meaning to review on the podcast, a book that was put together about kind of the stories of debate team and why the debate team mattered. And when I first got the book, I was looking forward to reviewing it, but the book is like really not good. It's not very well written. There's not a lot of good examples. Every chapter is very short. It's short on evidence. It's short on explanation. It's really meant for people who've already had that debate team experience to say, hey, look, we all kind of had the same experience of eating chicken fingers out of a styrofoam container at 3 a.m. and listening to really bad MP3s in a white 15-passenger van on a highway at 2 a.m. This kind of thing. And it's all these experiences together are thought of as kind of like not necessarily debate moments, but they are the debate moments that unite people together. And I was thinking about that book quite a bit, and it really didn't sit well with me at first. But after being in Boston this weekend, I was kind of like, oh, yeah, there's all kinds of interesting things that debate does putting people together. But debate has to be a bit more than just a social engineering exercise. Debate is using rhetoric, and rhetoric is a very powerful and dangerous thing. Everybody who studies it knows it. That's why people run away from it so often. I wonder if I can bring this up. Let's see. It was on earlier today on the famous Communication Scholars for Transformation Facebook page, which I'm hot and cold on. I'm not a big fan of it. Sometimes it's good. But today, it was a very, very strange post that was put up by the Critical Cultural Studies Division. I was not a big fan of this. I'll put this up here so we can take a look at it together. So, I got to zoom it in so you guys have a chance of actually reading it. I'm glad I haven't sneezed yet. Critical Cultural Studies Division. And, of course, this is all NCA stuff. And one of the big things I thought was Communication Scholars for Transformation was about the abolition of NCA, either through a proposal for dissolving it and taking it for what it is, which is just kind of I don't know, like a company that puts a conference together. They really don't do a lot for anybody. Not a lot for scholars, not a lot for professionals. I don't think they do very much. I'm not a big fan of NCA. They're kind of like the ETS, who runs the SAT. They're like the only game in town. So they know you have to pay them for the conference because that's where the interviews go on. That's where you're going to get your job. That's where you're going to get your conference presentations that are going to get you promoted. So they feel very, very comfortable in their position. But taking a look at this, it's another statement, like the statement I talked about last time with NCA. It's perhaps a truism to say that we live in troubling times. The Critical and Cultural Studies Division leadership acknowledges that these have been challenging days for our members and especially for those who are precariously situated. No argument there. We also acknowledge there's nothing we can say to make it better. This is a communication organization. I think it's weird that would be the first thing they'd say, and then they're like, we're going to take a political and ethical stand, but there's nothing that we can say to make it better. Then they say, we're going to take a political, ethical stand, and we're going to have programming. This is plenty to say. There's plenty of things you're saying here. Why is the National Communication Association redrawing that line between speech and action? When we all know, as scholars, as people who study communication, that division is only as real as you can convince the audience of it. Why are they re-upping? Why are they reinforcing that division between speech and action? There's nothing we can say, but we can try to make purpose and meaning. We believe that critical cultural studies are indispensable in the fight against authoritarianism. Okay, here's what we do. Let's talk about how to talk about it. We know that many of you want to do something. This thing you're opposing seems too big for any one person to make a difference. I just feel like this is a lot of platitudes in this. And I think that what a National Communication Association should do is be offering strategies of how to speak to others about it. 'Cause I find it to be an amazing resource that we talk to other people about their politics. Now, a lot of these people who are in this Communication Scholars for Transformation group and a lot of other people who, unfortunately, are communication professors, communication professionals, are all people who are like, no, we can't talk to these people. They're fascists. They're horrible fascists. We can't talk to them. I think that's a fine political position to hold, but not as a communication expert or scholar. I think the one thing we can add to all of the political hash and political, menagerie of what's going on right now, of different things that people can do or shouldn't do, or all the various discussions, is offer, here's how we can talk to people who we're close to who might have really, really bad takes on the authoritarian movement in the United States and elsewhere. It's not just in the United States. It's part of a global movement to the right based on a kind of an ethno-nationalism and a kind of a my country for my people kind of. So how do we undermine that through communication? What can communication theory tell us about how to show people that they are mistaken about difference, that they are mistaken? How can we create that? Remember, that's the, that's the Kenneth Burke, back to Kenneth Burke again. That's the thing. It's like, oh, no, you're just mistaken. You've made an error. And I think that this kind of thing, especially in terms of like symbolic ordering of the world and the power of symbols, and back to the definition of man, that human beings are the symbol using and abusing animal. I think that's what's going on now. And I think we have plenty of resources we could offer to this fight. Besides saying there's nothing any one person can do. I know it feels like that. There's nothing we can say. There's plenty that we can say. And there's even more that we can say about how to say it. And that's the line NCA should take. But once again, NCA shows that when times get tough, they don't really have a lot to offer to anybody. I think that one of the things the division wants to do is create an anti-authoritarian resource page for NCA into the classrooms and into your writing. I don't know. I think it's like, let's have a workshop on how we can make anti-authoritarian arguments that don't get the attention of the authorities, but have persuasive purchase on the people who can influence, who are our friends and neighbors. They really are. They might support Donald Trump. They might support ICE, but they're also our friends and neighbors. And that's a hard thing, I think, for people to accept. We're all just about, 2 or 3 thread pulls in the sweater away from being a terrible, terrible authoritarian fascist, if it was the other way. I live pretty close to New York City, and what I see in the New York City mayor's race is a phenomenon that I refer to as blue Trump, Andrew Cuomo. But blue Trump could be anywhere. Everybody wants a blue Trump. They want someone who will speak rudely, curtly, and simply, that they speak with an intense amount of sincerity about their beliefs, and an intense amount of sneering and dismissal of anyone who thinks otherwise as stupid. And this is kind of the Donald Trump rhetorical playbook. It's more complicated than that, but let's just take that as kind of a starting point. The blue Trump is that there are a number of Democrats and people who don't like Trump who wish that they had somebody who spoke like that for their ideas, which is the problem. The problem, no one should be speaking like that. No one should be speaking like that. No politician, no leader, nobody in a democracy should be speaking like that. These words are very dangerous. Rhetoric, as we know, is as dangerous as, like, you wouldn't give a child a chemistry set without instructions on how dangerous it can be and how cautious you have to be when you're playing with a chemistry set. I guess people don't. Do people still give people chemistry sets as a gift? Probably not. Maybe I'll give my nephews a chemistry set. But the problem is, without safety instructions, it'd be very dangerous. Burn the house down, cause explosions. These are real chemicals. When you're working with words, when you're playing with them, they're very dangerous. You might say, oh, it's just words. But words have an edge. Words slice through. That's why people are like, oh, you're particularly hard on NCA. No, because NCA needs to be more, and NCA leadership need to be more cautious of their words. The words have an edge. They cut, they slice, and divide knowledge. They separate knowledge from noise for a lot of people. And I think a National Communication Association should be leading on the communication front of things like anti-authoritarianism, police state, all of these things that are going on. And it's a global phenomenon as well, as many countries are facing the same kinds of issues. But their electorate is acting differently. Look at how the Australian electorate responded to make Australia great again. Only a few members of that party wore those hats. And in the national election in Australia, decimated. And people voted for a party that was okay, not grandiose, not having huge success, but wiped out the party that even played with the Donald Trump language. It's a big lesson there. But anyway, I've only got about maybe 20 minutes left. So we're going to talk about British parliamentary debate and a little bit about why British parliamentary debate has become something really dreadful. A lot of this was inspired by a listener who I talked to. And he was saying how in the British parliamentary debate community now, there's discussion that judges should remain neutral, stoic, still, and they should not react one bit to speakers. This is a complete 180 from the BP debate that I experienced and what I first saw, which was audience-centered debate. Now, people in policy debate have never really said this before until recently. They start talking about evidence-centered debate. And that was a reaction to the rise of parliamentary formats. NPDA, when it first came around, ate the lunch of traditional policy debate, decimated it. In Texas, decimated. Places of the Midwest, decimated. Now NPDA is really, really, really on life support. 20 teams at the Nationals. So the same thing that happened to policy debate from NPDA, what's doing that to NPDA? And the culprit is a format based on tournaments. Format is not necessary for having debates. Format is lore. Community and cultural norms and practices. 10 years ago, there was a guy who ran the case this way, and they had a lot of success, so now people do it that way. That's format. Format is like, these are the things you have to do in a successful whip speech to win. These are things, anything that's format related, in my mind, are things that are self-referential to practices in the debate that have been successful before, that are based on the rules of the debate. What a debate format that was rhetoric-based would tell us is that you work to get the audience on your side. You work to get audience assent. And that, I think, was best figured out in the 1920s of what that looked like by a guy named Bob Woodward, not the Bob Woodward you're thinking of. Not Bob Woodward who brought down Richard Nixon. Not that guy. But another Bob Woodward who was a debate coach in 1915, 1918. He wrote a great essay called Debating Without Judges, where he also talked about the shift of opinion ballot. He's the inventor of that, which is a ballot that you hand to the audience. It has two sides. And one side is, here's how I feel about this topic at the beginning of the debate. Here's how I feel at the end. Now, what I did when I used to run shift of opinion debates at St. John's is I would create one, hand it out on one color piece of paper, and then do it again at the end. And what you can measure is on a Likert scale, like a 1 to 7 scale. You can measure how much people have moved if you have, ordinate points. So you say, circle the number of where you are on this issue now. Very convinced, neutral, not so convinced, in disbelief. And then at the end of the debate, where are you? And then comparing those two things, looking at those totals and kind of graphing it, you can see how opinion might shift in a different direction. I think part of the problem with contemporary politics is we see it as a binary, either for or against something. And we don't want to engage in any practices that don't automatically flip our opponents to our side. There's nothing about seed planting or slow build or slow burn or slow consideration because it takes too long. It's not good for our news cycle. It's not good for the way that the blue Trump and the regular Trump like to speak. But there's going to be more and more blue Trumps everywhere because this is an incredibly successful mode of doing politics in the United States. And it's going to be copied, if not already. It's already kind of in other places, So that's what format is that collection of things of like what happened before and why that practice is here. It's like culture. It's almost like the stories of what happened before. Now, you do not need format to have debate. You need rules. And that's why I liked BP, because it seemed to me to be rules. It wasn't format when I encountered it. My first BP debate that I ever saw was in 2004 in a small town of Ormož, Slovenia. Yeah, I was, thank you very much. Yeah, let's hear it for Ormož. That small town, I was called by Tuna Snyder, late great Tuna Snyder, who's been on the podcast a couple times, way back when. And he called me up in my new office. I was just getting set up at the University of Pittsburgh. And he's like, meet me in Thanksgiving. What are you doing for Thanksgiving? Come and meet me. Fly to Venice, and I'll pick you up, and we'll go do a debate workshop, European-style debate in Slovenia. So I did. I went there. I was there with him, Dr. Joe Zompetti. Bojana Skirt was there. Was she there at the time? I feel like she might have been there. But anyway, she's been to all the other ones. But anyway, that first one. And then I think it was the second one that I went to where I met Harold Raitt from the See Here Teach studio in Scotland, who's an amazing educator, amazing debate thinker. And I'm very jealous of his Adobe InDesign talents. So I looked at this format, as I was calling it at the time, and I'm like, oh, these are just rules. Because all the things that format does for you in debate, how many points to have in a rebuttal, what order to do the arguments in the 1AR, these are all things that are, if you do not have an audience at all, and you're speaking to each other, it becomes about what satisfies debate. What satisfies the structure? What makes the argument satisfactory? And without an audience to reach as our measuring stick, the measuring stick kind of folds in on itself. It becomes this very meta practice, which I call the purification of argument. So any debate structure, you can have great rules for your debate, whatever it might be. As it develops a lore, we start to call it a format. That lore supersedes anything else in terms of what must be pleased. We have to please the old gods. We have to please the tradition. And judges and debaters work to please that tradition as if it were a living thing. It's like we evaluate ourselves in terms of what we have heard said in the past when we're young debaters by the people we admire, and by what we've heard said about debates that happened long ago before our time. And we all reach and strive to try to live up to those stories, that lore. It's like if you go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, in the medieval statues room by the big gate, they have a scroll that has been there forever. So I think it's for Edward the 5th or 14th or something. I don't know British. You're going to laugh at me because I don't know any of the British monarchy, like a lot of people should. Maybe I should. I don't know. A lot of people are really into this stuff, so they'll be able to correct me. But it's the succession of every king and how they came to power and how they died written out as like a story. And when I saw this document recently, I was just there. I thought, oh, this is format. This isn't the rules of being the king of England. This is the format that you must live up to. And the way you determine your identity of how to behave rhetorically as king is through the record of the behaviors that other people saw and know. We all have that shared experience, that shared narrative. And we have that in debate format too. But I thought BP would be great because we get us back to audience, which is the teaching of rhetoric. When we're speaking to an audience, purification is not the goal. We're not trying to find a pure kind of argument. And in rhetoric, we've dismissed that a long time ago, but I'm not so sure when I look at what a lot of people in rhetoric are doing these days. I kind of feel like we've caught the perfection bug, particularly when we're talking about things like race and gender politics and stuff. We do not want to do scholarship talking about how people speak about this. We want to do scholarship of how to speak correctly about this. And I think that difference is a pretty big and pretty deep chasm, even though I think the majority of the field or the center of the field doesn't see it that way one bit. But I think that how people speak about these things provides a lot of political insight and a lot of really important material to fight against whatever your politics might be that you don't think should be in there. It provides the tools to help other people do it too, if you're publishing outside of Taylor and Francis. So they don't screw it up or they don't, put a $5,000 paywall or whatever in front of your work. It should be on a blog. It should be on social media. It should be out there for people to access and use as a tool. It's not esoteric philosophical stuff that must be only circulated among the high priests. It really is for people to engage That's the way I feel about debate too. It's to teach you how to engage better. So when we're aiming at perfection in format, perfection of argument, all we're getting is perfection of format. Now, Perlman and Obrecht-Titica talk about this in New Rhetoric, and I've gotten slammed for this many times, so I'm going to try to explain it as clearly as I can for the people out there who might need a little extra help in understanding Perlman and Obrecht-Titica. I was thinking about a couple of people who are big in BP when I was making this argument, is that it's easy to mistake a Vanguard audience for a universal audience. What do they mean by that? If you think you're speaking universally to principles or values or identities that you think everyone should have, then you're really only speaking to a vanguard. The people who you hope that one day everyone in your actual reachable audience, the universal audience is everyone you could conceivably reach, not everyone, but everyone you could conceivably reach with your argument. You tend to think of, well, if I can reach these people who think the right way and understand things the right way, then I've done my job, and eventually everyone will come around to this way of thinking because it's true. My students make a terrible version of this, which is when I'm talking about the difficulty of politics around transgender people or queer people or any of these kind of things. They say, oh, don't worry, the boomers will all be dead soon. But what if being a boomer is a state of mind? What if being a boomer is a political identity, or worse, a rhetorical identity? What if it's not age-related at all? Maybe it's just concentrated in people who are in their 70s, 60s, and 70s. Now, what if it's an attitude, as Burke would say, or a rhetorical identity? What then? What happens then? You have no way to address it because your solution is, well, they're all going to die, so I don't need to address it. I don't need to have a strategy because it's not going to be around anymore. Foolishness. But BP teaches this kind of thing. It's like, well, if we all speak in this pure language of debate based on format of what we've learned over the decades of having this tournament about what wins, we're eventually going to purify debate and come up with amazing arguments that will be sure to persuade everyone who's reachable at the point where they gain the experience and intelligence and cultural cachet to be a part of this organization, WUDC. Or BP, or USU, which USU is defunct on, I think. Bye-bye, USU. Yeah, I think, that's kind of where we're starting off, is this idea that the tournament slices off it's like a Procrustean bed. It slices off all the limbs that don't fit what works for it. And then from there, we're developing this lore we call format, which we talk about. How is debate done? How does debate work? What's the right way to think about debate? And then we tell these lore stories as if they were the purification of argument. But they're really just the way a particular vanguard, an imaginary audience based on our preferences, after going to tournament after tournament after tournament, our preferences of what we think pure argumentation is, and we reach that, and then we think we've taught something. And that's what happened to BP over a period of time. Let's take a look at some video here. Take a look at a couple of videos. This is the 1993 Oxford World University's Championship Grand Final. C-SPAN felt like it was appropriate to broadcast this. C-SPAN wouldn't come anywhere close to World University's debate finals if you paid them. Why? Because it doesn't look like public affairs programming. In fact, it's not public affairs, it's private affairs. It's private vanguard affairs. Now, let's take a look at a little bit of this speech, because I do want to make a point about a little bit of this opening government speech here in the Oxford Debate Chamber in 1993.
Mr. Speaker, honoured judges, members of this House, I was speaking to last year's winners of the grand final, and they told me there was two things that I must do. They said that I must be funny, and they said that I must be polite.
This is Richard Douglas speaking from Australian National University.
Then I saw the topic, ladies and gentlemen, that this House would use armed force to make peace. Now, to assure all of you, I intend to continue my last year's resolution of being polite. However, this is not a topic that calls for lightheartedness. It doesn't take a smart bomb, ladies and gentlemen, to realise that this is a topic of utmost gravity.
Maybe a pretty bad joke there, but here's one thing that I've already noticed about this. He's looking around. He's speaking to the gallery. He's speaking to the audience. And everything is part of his timed speech. All of this introductory matter. There's nothing that's extra rhetorical or outside of the discourse of debate, like you see now where people will speak for 5 or 6 minutes about their coaches and their training and where they're from and how hard they've worked and all this. And then you get into the debate. It's like that stuff, the stuff that orients the audience to who you are and gets them the feeling and the gravitas and the situation of being in a global championship round is all extraneous to the speech. It's all extraneous to the speech because the speech is not aimed at an audience anymore. That is a big change. I think this is really, really nice, and it's nice to see his nonverbals here.
And therefore, I wish to propose, with all the force that the proposition is capable of mustering, this serious topic with no more amusement offered to you than my humble ancestry, which is, of course, Australia. When we say that this House would use armed force to make peace, we have a simple definition and one that we trust our colleagues opposite will accept. By it, we mean that this House endorses the use by the United Nations of multinational peacekeeping forces, not only to keep the peace, but also to make the peace, ladies and gentlemen. We are prepared to tolerate international intervention. Now, when we say peace, of course, this is not something that can go without understanding or definition. We don't intend to be proposing, sir, a peace that passeth understanding. On the contrary, we intend to be talking about a very serious peace, a peace that is more than simply an absence of war, a peace that can only be seen when we also see two other things as in addition to an absence of war. A maintenance of the most basic human rights of people, the prevention of the most base, gross, persistent and intransigent violations of human rights. And this necessarily implies, as a third requirement of peace, the imposition of some basic civil order. Because not yet, sir. It is the contention of this side of the House that the most compelling reason that can draw any nation to war, the most honourable reason, is in the defence of those fundamental human rights which all of us share and which we wish all citizens of this planet were able so to share.
Okay, so I think that's enough for us to kind of get a sense of, I'd like to go through the whole thing, but maybe I'll do a YouTube video on that, or I can go through the whole speech and kind of look at what he's doing. But this is, of course, not just rules, but it's a lot more close to rules than what we have today. The reason being is because they're seeing it as a vehicle, as a way of speaking to an audience. They're not speaking to the past. They're not speaking to the ghosts. One of the ways you can think about modern BP practice and the reason the judge must stay silent and quiet is because a lot of debate could be seen as a seance. This is a way of speaking to the long dead spirit ancestors of debate and making sure they're pleased. It's almost like a ritual in a way. That we have to say all of these things that are somewhat empty in meaning or perform all of these different arguments that aren't meant for a living and contemporaneous audience, like what Kenneth Burke was talking about in my Philosophy of the Ben bit at the beginning of this podcast, where he's talking about, ordering things based on the holiness of, well, this has always been considered to be good, and this is always good taste, is not as useful for getting people interested in literature or finding literature useful than to group different kinds of literature based on the situations that they're addressing. Audience is always in motion. Audience is always changing. And audience, I hate to say it, are always not going to be what you want them to be. You're going to have to adapt and adjust to the audience. And sometimes you might think the audience to be pretty dumb. That's okay.
And I'll take you on that point, sir. So these objectives...
So the debate rolls on. You can watch this on YouTube, 1993 Oxford World University's Debating Championship. Now let's look at a contemporary example and compare what that sounds like. The 2025 finals. I think it's the 2025 finals. What do I have for us here? Panama 2025. And the recording quality is not as good because C-SPAN ain't interested anymore in any of this. And you'll see. I think you'll see why. Let's take a look at, I don't know the name of the speaker and I don't know the motion because these things are not, it's not for the audience, it's for the Vanguard. So.
populations have been failed by politicians and political groups that through the veils of identity politics have told them that they are represented when in reality they are not, when in the vast majority of instances our policies contradict the very thing individuals believe their party represent, and when in many instances it is about a dichotomy which lies to you, strips you of your taxes, and instrumentalizes you to put politicians in office that do not represent you. Or you can I believe that the shift that we've had, where individuals are, number one, rejecting their affiliation in many instances to particular like sides of the political spectrum, i.e. I am not necessarily a leftist or a right-wing, but I'm rather like an issue voter, for example, where I believe that climate change matters, or I believe that abortion matters. Still, you can obviously have a history of voting for a particular party because you might prefer the particular politicians or the policies, but not to be affiliated fully or for this to decrease over time is what we support. So what does this look like? Yes, first of all, it looks like less identity politics. It looks like having more things in the middle. In fact, it's having more types of identification within political parties. It's the fact that people within the left, for example, or within parties such as the Democrats in the United States say, I do not work in the same way that others do. I am not a traditional leftist politician because while I do support, for example, abortion and the environment, I just believe that we should be fiscally...
Okay, so what can we say here? What can we say about this? There's so much going on here. I found the motion down here. This House supports the shift away from the traditional left-right spectrum and the politics of major democracies. This guy's speaking a mile a minute. Who is this for? This is not for the audience. When we look back to the 1993 final, we could see someone much more interested in the audience. He is much, much more interested in what's in the papers in front of him and getting all of these things out that he thinks are important for the argument. But it's an argument sans audience, sans human beings, sans people. This argument is for the pleasure of debate itself. That's what I would suggest. Who else would it be for? It's for the people. They think it's like a winning argument. His partner is nodding away. She thinks it's great. They're thinking about their strategy against it. But I think that we don't really see something that is attempting to get the audience mobilized and motivated. It's more of just like, here's what it's going to be. I'm just going to lay these things out as quickly as I can, as flat as I can. And now we have something that doesn't really resemble a debate at all. It might resemble a debate in terms of high philosophy or something. I don't know, but the purification of debate between 1993 and 2025 has brought us this kind of very fast
the other side of the aisle. So it is more specific representation. It is also more parties, because I think that when you have more like of a discourse that says it is not just the left and the right.
It's just very descriptive and very flat and not an attempt to get people to there's no pause in here for people to think. You're just supposed to take this in. It's almost like a fire hose of argumentation. So that comparison shows a lot has changed, and I think it represents pretty well this move from we have rules that allow us to have a formal debate to address audience to we have a format that must be placated. We must speak in the ritual way to the past to placate the history and the ghosts of our, or maybe the important developments in our culture. These people probably think that WUDC or BP debating is a very rarefied and purified form of debate that not many people can be very good at, not many people can understand, and that's what makes it good because it's sort of like concentrated in a lab. Not everyone can do laboratory research, like in science. Not everyone can do that, nor should they be able to do that. Not everyone can be a physician. But I think everyone should be able to debate and understand a debate. Maybe not a debate between two heart surgeons, but everybody should be able to participate and understand a debate. Well, how did we get here? We got to go back to this, which I talked about endlessly before on the podcast. And to anybody who listened to me, the Debating and Judging Manual, which used to be known as the Malaysia World's Debating and Judging Manual. And I'm not going to go too into this. It was first started in advance of the Malaysian World Championships. But why would you put the list of contributors if this was just a document of the rules you're going to enforce? What you're trying to show is that there's some ethos here, that these are people who know what they're doing. These are people who understand what debate is and should be. And they're experts in the lore of debate. They're not experts in the rules. They're not experts in argumentation either. They're experts in what BP debate is supposed to look like, the normative. And this is a compilation of all of their thoughts. And, off it goes. And it talks about all the different things. Now, the part that's good about rules, I think, is good. Rules are important. And if you see the rules, you might think, okay, I don't want to do this kind of debate. I don't like these rules. That's fine. But then there's like all kinds of things about how to judge the debate, which I think get a little weird. Here's the part that has caused much ire and much spleen pangs and indigestion. Is this persuasive model that has 0 citations still and no reference to any research done on persuasiveness, oral persuasion, argumentation, or debate, stuff that's published on all the time. Now, whose fault is that? Is that their fault? No, it's the fault of NCA and other big organizations, RSA, other big communication organizations that study and publish argumentation. It's also the fault of OSSA and the Canadian School of Argumentation. They don't reach out to the public with their ideas. They just don't. And so these people just kind of cobble this together from what they think persuasion is. And it's just the most horrible kind of understanding of audience. But you also wouldn't need this section at all if you weren't debating about lore, aka format. If you're just using the rules to reach ordinary intelligent voters, debating for audiences, you wouldn't have a problem at all. But this is why, BP is not long for this world. I don't know I guess worlds will still continue to happen, because in the end, it is kind of a fun hobby for people who are pretty privileged and can have a kind of a nice, narrow kind of understanding of, who the audience is that we're speaking to, this vanguard audience. But reaching real people and reaching publics and reaching audiences is a different matter. But we have all the tools to do it. I'm doing it with you right now. Now, I don't know if I'm doing a pretty good job, I think, speaking to the universal audience or anyone who could encounter this and trying to make my arguments as persuasive as possible. To do that, I have to make them very accessible. I have to make them understandable, but I also have to play with the timbre of my voice, with emotion, with pause, to get you interested. What we just saw from the Panama Worlds, you're already bought in to be interested. He doesn't have to make you interested. He doesn't have to. You're already interested because you want to see him do the dance steps of the ritual dance. It's almost like a religious event where everything has to be done in the certain ways to please the tradition and the faith that we have in the perfection of debate. Rhetorical debate's not like that. The model would be audience. And here with this technology, like I'm speaking to you, however you're choosing to listen to this podcast, whether it's Spotify, iHeartRadio, or YouTube, or Radio Public, or whatever, this technology is so easy to access and so affordable. Why isn't debate doing that? The reason why is because they like their little private game. I don't think debate, I think that's why BP's failed us. BP could be an engine, just like NCA, the thing I read about NCA and the Cultural Studies Division, it could be an engine of helping people learn to communicate about these difficult times. But instead it freezes them out and says, no, we're working on the perfection of it. You'll eventually get here. When you're ready, it will be here for you. Why not make them ready? Where's the pedagogical-oriented, rhetorically based debate rule set? I guess it could be anything. As long as you have an audience there passing judgment on it, I think you're going to be in a better position than any of these formats. I think formats are doomed to fail at the moment they start. Doomed to fail. Because eventually you get too caught up in the lore. Then you're not really teaching anything but the tradition of the format. That's it. Well, that's it for our time. Oh, almost a perfect show. I almost did it perfectly. I guess these things are going to be 1 hour from here on out. Anyway, I'm Dr. Steve Yano, and The Ben is a production of International Debate Research Associates, LLC, who's solely and totally responsible for all of the content you hear. If you have a question or comment, please email us at inthebenpodcast@gmail.com. You can also get In The Ben at any of the places where fine podcasts are purveyed. Spotify, iHeartRadio, Radio Public, YouTube, all over the place. And of course, you never have to do this, but if you like what we're doing, send me a little money. Buymeacoffee.com in the bin podcast. We'll see you on the next episode. Thank you for listening.